Okay, today I'm going to talk to you about cultural factors and the influence on political attitudes and socialization. Great. So, firstly, it's important to point out that a person's voting behavior and political ideology are attached to our generation, the generation that we belong to. And while it's important to note that these are generalizations and there is variation within each generation, we can identify certain characteristics associated with major generations. And this has been analyzed by political scientists. So the first generation, the oldest generation right now, is called the silent generation. Okay. So these are people that were born before 1945 and they came of age during the Great Depression and World War II. They're not a whole heck of a lot of these folks still alive today, but a lot of the characteristics that they have kind of have been passed down to another generation we're going to be talking to. So many in the silent generation embraced religious beliefs and had a high value on church attendance, as well as adhering to traditional gender roles, meaning the idea that men do this type of work and women do that type of work. And generally, they tend to be more conservative, the silent generation is. Now, the cultural changes of the 1960s, such as the counterculture and women's rights movements, often clash with their conservative values. And generally, the silent generation supported American intervention abroad during the Cold War, particularly in the Vietnam War. So they tend to voted for candidates who advocated for tough approaches to crime and terrorism as well. And as a group, senior citizens from the silent generation have the highest voter turnout. The next group is the baby boomers, and these are the children of the silent generation. These were born after World War II, folks that up until the 1960s and mid 60s, this is where the time period again, World War II to the mid 1960s. These baby boomers experienced the prosperity of the 1950s and witnessed it a lot of changes in the 1960s. Baby boomers are slightly more liberal than the silent generation, but still lean toward conservatism. And this generation's size is significant, as many families were having children during this period. The silent generation, especially World War II veterans, came home and were given the GI Bill, and so they immediately settled down and had many children, and those children are the baby boomers. Next is Generation X. This is where I belong. I was the Generation X folks were born between the mid 1960s and the 1980s. Generation X grew up during a time of increasing divorce rates and the emergence of the internet. And Generation X are slightly more liberal than their parents, partially due to greater ethnic diversity within this generation. Then there are the millennials, and these are people born between 1981 and 1996. So millennials are even more liberal than the previous generations, and they're the most ethnically diverse generation, with a significant percentage being non-white. Millennials tend to support liberal policies and are more likely to perceive racial discrimination as a societal issue, and they're more favorable towards immigrants and inclined towards policies with increased government intervention. So next, I'm going to talk to you about generational patterns. So just talked about the generational characteristics of those three groups, and they demonstrate a pattern that the older the generation is, the more likely they are to be more conservative, while the younger generations tend to be more liberal. For instance, a new poll from the Pew Research Center showed that 46% of the silent generation approved of conservative President Donald Trump's performance, compared to only 20% of millennials. Let's talk a little bit about life cycle events. The idea here is that people's political beliefs and behaviors are influenced by the stage of life they're in. For example, an 18-year-old casting their vote during the 2020 presidential primaries might have been attracted to a candidate like Bernie Sanders, who proposed free college tuition. This resonated with young voters who face the burden of expensive education. But on the other hand, the silent generation, consisting of non college going individuals with adult children and grandchildren, might have been less enthusiastic at Bernie Sanders' proposal for free college tuition, as they didn't see the direct benefit and were concerned about the costs. So as people progress through different life stages, their priorities and voting behavior can change accordingly. To summarize, both generational effects and life cycle effects contributed to political socialization. Each generation has its own political leanings, with younger generations generally becoming more liberal than their predecessors. Meanwhile, the stage of life a person is in can also shape their political beliefs and behavior.